Friends, you remember the night that Jesus was betrayed? And he brought his disciples to the upper room and he sat them down for the Passover meal. Remember, he told them during that meal that every single one of them was going to abandon him that very night. And Peter, remember perhaps the most outspoken disciple of them all, remember what Peter said? Take a look. He said this. Peter replied, "Even if I fall away on account of you, all of them, I never will." And you remember what Jesus said? Jesus said, "Truly I tell you," Jesus answered, "this very night, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." In other words, hey, Peter, you say that you're not going to abandon me, but guess what? Tonight, your faith in me is going to be tested, and you're going to fail the test. And you remember what Peter said? He said this, "But Peter declared, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." In other words, hey, Jesus, I'm going to pass this test. Don't worry, I got this. My faith in you is strong. But you remember what happened? Later that night, Jesus was arrested. He was taken to the religious leaders, and Peter stood outside waiting to see what would happen for the one he called the Messiah. And at some point in the evening, he sat down around a fire with some other people who were gathered there, and this young servant girl, remember, she comes up, she says, "Hey, were you with Jesus?" And Peter says, "You must be confused. I don't know who you're talking about." And he gets up and he walks away. A little later, somebody says, "Hey, weren't you with Jesus?" And he says, "No, you must be mistaken. I don't know that man." And then finally, a little later, somebody comes up and says, certainly you were with Jesus." You remember what Peter said? "No, stop. I don't know that man." And right then the rooster crowed. And all of a sudden, Peter was overcome with this guilt that the test that Jesus said that he was going to do, the one that Peter said that he was going to pass with flying colors, he had just failed. He had failed the test. And Scripture tells us that Peter, overcome with his failure, he began to weep bitterly, and he ran away. Now, friends, think about this for a moment. That should have been the last that we heard of Peter, yeah? That Peter was a disciple of Jesus. He was outspoken. He did some bold things. But when the time came for him to declare his faith in Jesus, he failed. And there goes another one. But friends, if you remember how the story goes, Jesus wasn't done with Peter. And the reason he wasn't done with Peter was because Jesus understood something that Peter had yet to understand. That the testing of your faith doesn't produce the end of your faith. The testing of your faith produces perseverance. In other words, the test of faith, the one where Peter denied Jesus 3 times, that test would prepare him for tests of faith that he would experience in the future. And so you know what, friends? Here's what we're going to do for the rest of our time together this morning. We're going to take a look at 2 things that Jesus teaches Peter and that he teaches you and me in terms of how we respond to situations that test our faith. And the hope is that when you leave here today, that you'll have a better understanding of maybe how to tackle situations differently, knowing that the tests of faith are not something to be avoided in the Christian life, but rather they're opportunities to be prepared for tests of faith, oftentimes bigger tests of faith, that you will experience in the future.